Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I will call this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. There are a couple of additions to the agenda. So under new business, we have document 21-071, which is a letter to Premier Ian Rankin regarding the third wave of COVID and a reopening plan. And then we have two applications to purchase land. And again, those are under new business. Are there any other additions to the agenda? Hearing none, could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended, please?
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Tanner, seconded by Councillor Thorburn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. We have a couple of announcements, just proclamations. So these are found on the town's website. So the week of May 30th to June 5th is Access Awareness Week in Nova Scotia. And it's quite timely, as we at our last meeting discussed our new accessibility plan and something that we're working in partnership with the other municipalities around the county. And in reading the proclamation, this is the 34th year that this has been proclaimed in Nova Scotia. So I thought that was really cool. So that's the May 30th to June 5th. And the week of June 6th to 12th is Shriners International Awareness Week. I'm sure everyone is very aware of what the Shriners do, not just in our community, but globally. And so that'll, again, be posted on our website. And thank you to all the volunteers in those groups. We don't have any delegations. We have the minutes of May 10th, 2021 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing shaking heads, can I have someone please move the approval of the minutes? Councillor Caldwell, seconded by Councillor Frazier. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. And we'll jump right into planning items. Development agreement for 333 King Street, first reading report. And this will be as we go through it, this will be a very familiar piece of property to most in the community. So we'll turn it over to Ms. Childs for that.
Thank you. Just going to get my presentation up. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Great. So staff received an application for a development agreement at 333 King Street on February 8th. The application is for 5 5-unit buildings, and the location of the property is shown here with a star at the corner of King Street and Maple Street. This is the current property. It's 0.58 acres and is currently vacant. There's a sidewalk on King Street, but not on Maple Street or Prince Street along the back. And there's an existing driveway entrance off of Maple Street. So the application is for 25 units in total, made up of 5 buildings with 5 units each. Each building would be 2.5 stories and would include a unit on each floor. There would be 2-bedroom units on the first and second stories and a 1-bedroom unit in the attic story. The applicant is proposing to have 1 barrier-free unit in each building, or at least visitable units, and intends to have all 25 units be affordable. The property is zoned historic downtown commercial, or C1, and as you can see, it's on the edge of the C1 zone, which is in pink, and it transitions into the residential zone on the next property. The surrounding zoning is historic downtown commercial, downtown residential, high density residential, single unit residential, and park nearby as well. The surrounding uses are multi-unit residential, single unit residential, and some commercial properties. So I'll go through the main details that are addressed in the development agreement. The development agreement states that there would be 25 residential units in 5 buildings as a collective development on a single lot. The architectural design of the buildings shall be in substantive accordance with the renderings, including in the development agreement. And this, as you can see on the screen, is one of those renderings. The height and massing of the building shall be in substantive accordance with the elevation drawings, and the elevation drawings reflect what is shown in this rendering here. This is another view of the proposed development looking from the back corner. So the last one there was looking kind of from King Street and Maple Street. And this is looking back from kind of Prince and Maple Street. And as you can see, all the buildings are designed to be facing King Street with the access off of Maple Street. And the 3 buildings at the back are backing onto Prince Street. The development agreement states that the location of the building shall be in substantive accordance with the site plan as shown here. You can see King Street along the right side there and Maple Street along the top. There would be 2 buildings on King Street and then 3 near Prince Street because the lot kind of gets larger as you go back. There's surface parking proposed between the 2 rows of buildings as well as bicycle parking. The development agreement requires the driveway and parking area to be in substantively the same location and dimensions as shown on the site plan. It also requires pedestrian walkways to be constructed as shown on the site plan. So they connect the buildings to each other, they connect to the parking area, and they also connect over to Maple Street and King Street along the front. The limits of the parking area and points of access shall be defined by curb, landscaping, or vegetation, but wherever the walkways intersect with the parking lot, there shall be no physical barrier restricting access. As for parking, the development agreement states that there shall be a minimum of 16 vehicular parking spaces, including 2 barrier-free spaces. There shall be a minimum of 9 bicycle parking spaces, and the location shall be in reasonable accordance with the site plan. The development agreement also states that wherever possible, existing trees and vegetation shall be retained. So there are some trees along the Maple Street side, and trees shall only be removed with prior approval of the development officer. And trees shall be planted in reasonable accordance with the site plan. So if they can't keep them, they would have to replace them, or they would have to add the ones shown on the site plan. A detailed landscaping plan will also be required before development permit issuance. And there shall be a minimum of 2,800 square feet of amenity space, including some balconies. The development agreement states that prior to development permit issuance, sanitary sewer and water service drawings are required. A detailed stormwater management report is required, and all post-development peak stormwater runoff flows shall be equal to or less than pre-development stormwater runoff flows. A public participation meeting was held on March 24th. Notification was provided to properties within 100 feet of the property, and an ad was posted in the South Shore Breaker. 1 member of the public attended, and staff received 2 emails, one with concerns and one with support. The main concerns were lack of parking, support for affordable housing, and solid waste. So I guess not all concerns, but the different thoughts. The municipal planning strategy policies were analyzed to ensure that development is supported in policy. The MPS describes the historic downtown commercial zone as the traditional commercial center that offers retail, professional, service-related business, and complementary residential. And the MPS encourages a mix of land uses, compact development, a range of housing options, improved appearance of built form, and improved pedestrian experience. The MPS also aims to strengthen the appeal of the downtown for residents. So the addition of residential units downtown supports a more walkable, dense, and lively downtown by having people in that area. The MPS contains policy statements specific to development agreements, which focus on compatibility of use, compatibility of the building, landscaping, adequacy of infrastructure, accessible or making sure it's accessible by emergency services, active transportation and parking, and environmental impacts. And I'll just touch on a few of those. So the land use is compatible with those adjacent to it because the C1 zone encourages complementary residential and commercial uses, and there's a mix of land uses nearby. The development is compatible with the adjacent land uses and properties because of the variety of surrounding uses, as mentioned, the similar height, style, and scale of the buildings as well, plus the added density at the edge of the historic downtown commercial zone. As for infrastructure, since the proposed development does not exceed what is permitted as of right, wastewater offsetting would not be required. Service drawings are required before permit issuance, as mentioned though. The development would be located at the corner of arterial and collector streets, which are intended for higher volumes of traffic. Bicycle parking, vehicular parking, and pedestrian access to the existing sidewalk would be required. And the vehicular parking would be slightly more than required by the land use bylaw, and the bicycle parking would be slightly less than required, but that can always be varied through the development agreement process. There are also policy statements related to general and residential development in the MPS. And those applicable to this development application relate to minimizing conflict between land uses, supporting a full range of housing options and styles, supporting walking and cycling, amenity space, residential densification, and maximizing infrastructure. So I already talked about most of these. But regarding the full range of housing options and styles, this development would consist of 1 and 2 bedroom units with a plan to have some of the units visitable, which means that anyone could access the units without any obstacles. The developer also intends to have many, if not all, of the units affordable. The inclusion of the affordable units is not being held to in the development agreement, though, because policy permits this development without requiring affordable units, so they could do it without that, and it would still be supported. And also, if support from the third-party housing organization was no longer available, the units couldn't be maintained as affordable. Finally, though, in order for the town to enforce any provisions like this, affordable housing needs to be included in the land use bylaw, but specifically for this zone, and it's not included for the C1 zone because there is no added bonus like there is in other zones. The MPS has policies on open space and the environment, and the relevant ones are required green space and amenities, retention of trees and vegetation, and that all post-development peak flows are equal to or less than pre-development for stormwater. So I mentioned that there is a minimum of 2,800 square feet of amenity space that would be required, and this is less than required by the land use bylaw, but staff believe it's an appropriate amount because due to the nature of the development style, by having multiple buildings on one lot, there's limited room on the property, and the property is also located near a few different municipally owned open spaces, including Shipyards Landing and Woodland Gardens. And although it's a residential development, since it's located in the historic downtown commercial zone, there are some commercial policies that relate to it, including policy CDA 6, which states that buildings must be between 2 and 5 stories in height. Buildings on corner lots should emphasize the importance of the corner. Strong consideration must be given to the urban design requirements. Minimum amenity space requirements must exist, and the development must be in accordance with policy IM6. So regarding the urban design requirements that are mentioned, they state that a 0-foot step back from streets is ideal, and setback shall be no more than 8 feet. They also state that the requirement to orient buildings towards King Street is important. Minimizing the distance between the building and the corner when on a corner lot is important. And there's a requirement to connect to a sidewalk. So all of those have been met. So since the development is supported in policy, staff recommend that council give first consideration to the development agreement for 333 King Street, and that council schedule a public hearing during the regular meeting of council on June 14th.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Questions from members of council? Councillor McDonald.
So I heard you mention that there's preference to have buildings facing King Street, but do we not have any policy that requires buildings to be facing the streets where possible? So you would have 3 of the buildings facing King Street, and the other 2, instead of being back to I think it's Prince, isn't it?
Maple Street along the side.
Okay, and Prince along the back?
Yeah.
Those buildings the back is facing the street. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the back is facing Prince Street, and then the side of the buildings are facing Maple Street.
Okay,
yeah.
We don't have any policies that require them to be front facing on the street?
Not specifically for this. So the policy that talks about orienting towards King Street is specifically for the urban design requirements and the urban commercial zone. So it's often, there's a bit more specific rules or things to follow within the C1 zone. So that's where that came from.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions from Mackenzie? Councillor Caldwell.
A couple things. Solid waste. How is the development dealing with the solid waste?
Sure. So there is, let's go back to the site plan. You can see on the bottom, I don't know if you can see my mouse, that is where the solid waste is. So it's actually away from all of the streets and close to the property line of the area beside it. So in the development agreement, it specifically, I can't remember the specific wording, but it more or less states that it has to be kind of away from the streets and like not visible. So this is kind of like a shed that they're proposing. So it would be in the shed.
And another question. Some residents have brought up correctly, I think, that the downtown plan a number of years ago had the concept of a bridge in that area, a third bridge. So I'm just wondering if that's something that council has it ever been considered that we would request a bridge in that site? Because it seems as though this would sort of eliminate that ever being pursued.
Yeah, so I won't speak to anything more than what I've experienced since being here, but there hasn't been much conversation about moving that forward in the near future. So that was brought up, I think, actually at the public meeting, if I remember correctly, but it's not something that is in the near future to do. So it's not something that was focused on for this, but we do look at the downtown waterfront master plan when we're looking at more downtown developments, but there's nothing that I'm aware of that is planned for that.
It's a question that comes up every few years, Councillor Caldwell, for sure. It might not be a bad question to ask our transportation infrastructure renewal partners the next time we're meeting to discuss the 12A interchange, just to see where their plans lie for that bridge, because it would be a provincial bridge. So it's perhaps just a mental note for the CAO and myself that the next time we have those people in the room, we'll perhaps ask them where that sits. I think it's a moving target. Other questions on this one? Is someone prepared to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bergier.
Yeah. I move that Council for the Town of Bridgewater give first consideration to the development agreement as contained in Appendix A of document 21-033A for 333 King Street and schedule a public hearing during the regularly scheduled council meeting on June 14th, 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Conklin. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none. Motion is carried. Thank you. It's kind of an exciting project. I know we certainly need more affordable units, and I know this developer is held in high regard by his current tenants, so we know it'll be a good project. Our next item is land use bylaw amendments for the urban commercial C3 zone. So I am looking to, there is Nelson, so we'll turn it over to Nelson.
I'm one of the other planners in the department, and I'll try to follow up on Mackenzie and her great presentation as best as I can. So I'll keep this fairly brief, as this is just the application briefing presentation. But staff is bringing forward this application for 2 land use bylaw amendments to the urban commercial zone. The proposed amendments would enable number 1, residential conversions within a building constructed prior to August 27, 1975, up to a maximum of 2 units. And it would remove the requirement for multi-unit residential development to exceed a floor area of around 5,000 square meters in gross floor area to be permitted by development agreement. So for a little bit of background on the urban commercial zone, it was created in 2014 to promote a more compact and consistent commercial transition between the town's edge and center. To achieve this, the zone accommodates commercial development, mixed-use development, and multi-unit residential development. So the first amendment is to permit residential conversions. Currently, single and 2-unit residential developments are not permitted in the urban commercial zone. This has created legal and non-legal nonconformities for several residential properties that existed prior to the change in 2014. So in total, there's 12 non-conforming residential uses in the C3 zone, 10 of which are legal, and 4 of the 12 are medium to high density residential. And so what this means is that owners of residential properties in the C3 zone aren't allowed to perform residential conversions, as other residents are permitted to do in zones that are primarily residential. And so the proposed change would just allow for the alteration, but not the demolition of a residential building in the zone, and an allowance to increase the number of principal dwelling units to a maximum of 2. So that's the first one. The second one is a housekeeping amendment. So the proposed amendment would remove the minimum gross floor area for multi-unit residential development to be permitted by development agreement. And the reason behind the housekeeping amendment is that the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw currently say different things. So under the policy in the municipal planning strategy, for the C3 zone, there's no minimum gross floor area requirement for multi-unit residential to be permitted by development agreement, but in the land use bylaw there is. So this amendment would just remove that minimum gross floor area requirement and enable multi-unit by development agreement. So there's no single subject property for this application. The amendments would affect the entire zone or all properties that are currently zoned C3, of which there's 49. And so this is the first step in the process. The second will be a detailed review by engineering, as well as community development staff against the criteria in the town's policies. There's a public participation meeting scheduled for June 9. And following that meeting, staff will incorporate feedback from residents, and then we'll give a full analysis of the amendment at a future meeting of council in a planning analysis report. And then, I think you're all very aware of the phase after that, which is the public hearing. So yeah, that's my presentation. And if you've got any questions, please ask.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Caldwell.
Yeah, seems to make sense. I'm just wondering what the catalyst was. Is this something that staff noticed there was an issue that needed to be addressed, or was it something else?
Yeah, so Nick was brought to the attention of a potential development that wouldn't have met the minimum gross floor area, and the potential applicants for that development wanted to do a multi-unit residential development. So this would potentially have allowed them to do that. And it's also that whenever staff picks up on any inconsistencies between the municipal planning strategy and the land use bylaw, we want to try and remedy those inconsistencies as soon as possible so that there's no confusion in future development processes for potential applicants.
Deputy Mayor Tanner.
That's fine. I had the same question.
Any other questions from council? So as Nelson said, this will be a very public process that'll be gathered, and will come back to council, where it will continue being a very public process as we go through the public hearings. One last chance for questions. Hearing none. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Nelson. We'll move on down to reports and recommendations. We have the monthly permit applications report for April. So despite some of the challenges that certainly the last half of April we faced in our province, things are kind of moving along. So that's positive to see. And so if you have any questions, please reach out to staff, and they can guide you through. And again, I continue to love this report as we changed it with all the additional information a few years back. So that's great. 9.2 is the Public Service Commission's temporary borrowing resolution guarantee. So this is, I think I saw our Director of Finance there on the call with us. Yes. So this is kind of standard procedure for council to address guarantee borrowing for the Public Service Commission, but I'll let Mrs. Hopkins run us through that.
Okay. So what happens with this debt is it already went to the Public Service Commission for approval, and we're asking for approval for all the capital projects that are in progress right now, because we don't just ask you to approve this once the projects are complete. It actually is required in order for us to temporarily borrow, perhaps from our bank and so on, during while the project's ongoing, and then we can choose to borrow and finance it in the long term through the Municipal Finance Corporation. So this is kind of the approval to temporarily borrow if we need to, and to ultimately finance it when the project's complete. However, we do still come back to both the PSC and the town when we are looking to finance that long term. So this is just I guess, an interim step, but not the final approval for us to borrow in the Public Service Commission. The amount's large because there are a couple of really big projects on the go in the Public Service Commission, so it is a little bit bigger amount than we're used to seeing because we have some multi-year projects ongoing right now.
Thank you. Questions from council? Again, it is kind of routine for us to go through this. Is someone prepared to make a motion?
I will, unless Councillor Thorburn would like to. He typically does these longer ones.
I know. I just as soon
wanna...
as you see whereas in the motion, you're like, Councillor Thorburn, that's like his favorite motion to make.
Well, normally I do. I went in to download them and I couldn't download it. I downloaded it now, but I don't know if I got everything. So, Andrew, you go ahead for the night.
It's like a gift.
Or I can if you want. It doesn't matter.
No, I can't. Well, it's up to you, Wayne. Sorry.
Well, if Councillor Thorburns concerned he doesn't have the whole thing, Deputy Mayor Tanner, why don't you read it just in case he's missing a section?
All right. I move that whereas the Public Service Commission of Bridgewater is a body corporate pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 59, Section 2 of the Statutes of Nova Scotia, 2011, and whereas the Public Service Commission of Bridgewater has resolved to borrow by the issue and sale of debentures the sum of $2,354,000, $2,354 million for the purpose of water systems, and whereas pursuant to Section 60, Section 4 of the subsection 4 of the Municipal Government Act, the Public Service Commission of Bridgewater has requested the town of Bridgewater to guarantee the principal and interest of the said borrowing. And whereas Section 88 of the Municipal Government Act provides that no guarantee of a borrowing by a municipality shall have effect unless the Minister of Municipal Affairs has approved of the proposed borrowing or debenture and of the proposed guarantee. Be it therefore resolved that subject to the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs, the town of Bridgewater unconditionally guarantee repayment of the principal and interest of the borrowing of $2,354,000 for the purpose set out above. That upon the issue of the temporary borrowing resolution, the mayor and the clerk of the town do sign the guarantee attached to the temporary borrowing resolution of Public Service Commission of Bridgewater and affix hereto to the corporate seal of the town, and are authorized to do all things and execute all documents necessary to give effect to this resolution.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Thank you. You scared me there for a minute, Deputy Mayor, when I heard you say, I thought you said $354 million, and then just had a bit of a panic there.
Big project, yeah.
Any further discussion? We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is request for support for the LCLC Energy Project. So this is kind of moving right ahead. I see our CIO is joining us. Are you going to run us through this, or are we going to put the chair of the board on the hot seat?
I can, unless he wants to go on the hot seat. No? Okay.
I need a drink of water after that last motion.
So this is a motion that's required of council to support an application that's been made by the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center Multipurpose Center Corp for funding under the Investing Canada Infrastructure Plan, the Greenhouse Gas Mitigation Fund, and it's to seek 73.33% of the cost of the energy project that's ongoing. Council would have approved the capital budget, which had the majority of these funds in there already. So it's not that you're being asked to approve a new capital expenditure. There is one slight change, and that was the budget that was approved had it was $1,526,600, and the motion that council is being asked to approve has the project that's being, I guess, summarized in the memo is the value of 1.8 million. So the difference there is a solar PV that would be include it within the project if funding were received. If funding were not received, we would not proceed with that. So the parties are not being asked to contribute any more than what they agreed to in the budget. And if funding is received, we'll be contributing less than what we agreed to in the budget. And the motions required by the funders to demonstrate the town's support for the project and the application.
Great, thank you. I'll just add that our partners at MODL have been very supportive, and the way things have been going the last few years, Deputy Mayor Tanner, you can add to this. I would say that the facility itself is really moving in the right direction. So we're seeing some changes there and investing back in the building, and appreciate the efforts by our partners along this line as well. Any discussion on this? No? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Frazier.
Okay. Yes, I'll make a motion that Council for the Town of Bridgewater supports the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center's energy project, including the ICIP CCM application, and commits to the town's share 50% of the municipal contribution for the project, 26.67%, resulting in a total project contribution of 13.34% from the town, and further, that the LCLC will finance the total project costs upfront and submit claims throughout the project.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Seconded by Councillor Caldwell. I feel like if you just kept saying percentages, we'd eventually get to 0% and we wouldn't have to contribute anything. It's just a declining scale. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Item 9.4 is the request to reschedule tax sales. I see our Director of Finance back on with us.
Well, we're in wave 3, and everything we thought we could do in March and April, we cannot do in May and prior to the 9th of June. So we had preliminarily set the tax sale date when all was clear, and it's set for June the 7th, which we now know is within the restriction timeframe. So we would like to reschedule that in hopes that we could hold it on July the 12th. It's about a month after hopefully the reopening plan will start, and that we can hold that tax sale in person. I think at the time we were anticipating, the gathering limit was probably 25, and we have 11 people currently registered. So we would have been well within that. So as long as we can get back to that size of a gathering limit, we should be fine for a July date, and assuming there aren't a lot more registrants. But, we think that should be fine. If we can't, then and the outlook for the summer is not changing, then we may have to come back with another proposal. But last year we had completely postponed the tax sale, so there was none in 2020. So we would like to get to being able to have that and in person, if possible, in July.
Great, thank you. Questions? Any comments on that? I had to mute my microphone as a giant truck went rolling by. Hearing no questions, is someone prepared to make a motion based on that recommendation? Councillor Caldwell.
I move the Council for the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff and approve the rescheduled date of the tax sale from June 7, 2021 to July 12, 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Frazier. Thank you. Further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is application to purchase land at 25 Cook Road. And so I'll turn that over to staff to explain this one to council and public.
Okay, so council had received a request to consider the sale of land on Cook Road for 7.16 acres. The offer price was $72,000, and it also included an exchange of land that we were looking at on the Winslow North Park Street intersection. Staff advised council that the appraised price was higher than $72,000, and based on our asking price, it would have market value would have been $143,200. And based on that, council reviewed the offer, and it's been referred to open session for council to make a decision with respect to whether they wish to consider the sale for the price of $72,000 as proposed, or decline the offer. And the recommendation is that council not accept the offer of $72,000, as it is less than the price set by policy and market value.
Thank you. Questions from council? I'll just say I support the recommendation. The land is appraised at higher value. We should be selling it at a higher value. I would argue that we're limited at what we can sell below market value anyway. So
yeah,
I think it puts us in a bit of a pickle if we were to accept the offer. I know there's a difference between appraised value and market value, but they're not that far off, I don't believe. So I don't know if there's other comments.
Would you like a motion?
Yes, please.
I move that Council for the Town of Bridgewater decline the offer and thus not authorize execution of the purchase and sale agreement and buyback agreement for 25 Cook Road.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving right along to business arising and unfinished business, we have the Energy Management Program and Efficiency 1 contract renewal.
Okay, so in October of 2020, council authorized staff to execute a renewed agreement with Efficiency 1 that would see the contract extended for on-site energy manager for a 2-year period, and that would end in October 2022. The agreement had a 6-month exit clause that enabled council to have some time to have some concerns addressed. The council wasn't completely satisfied with the contract the way it was, or the plan the way it was, and asked staff to work on a few items within that over the next 6 months to see if we could have a satisfactory resolution. Essentially, council felt that the plan needed to be a little bit more specific, especially in this present fiscal year, in terms of what would be the project, what would be the tangible project that we would work on throughout the year, and also identify those projects for the following fiscal year in terms of what we would evaluate. We also wanted to have a little bit of information on return on investment, so we understood if we make these capital investments, is it the greenhouse gas reduction targets that are being met? Is there a business case in terms of a financial benefit to the town to undertake the improvements? And you wanted to know what it would take to meet our targets of 34% reduction from 2015 baseline levels in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions. So we have worked with Efficiency 1 over the last few months, and we've come to a revised energy management plan, and that is included with your agenda. And that notes that to meet the town's targets of 34% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, there is an estimated investment of $3 million required, and that's by 2025, or $2,450 per ton of CO2 reduction. So that kind of puts it into a dollar perspective. Staff can advise that the capital budget doesn't have $3 million within it to achieve these reductions. We've been budgeting approximately, I think it was anywhere from $160,000 to $180,000 a year that has been allocated towards energy projects to see us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and our energy consumption. So we will have to source funding for some of these projects, and I can say that Allison and Miles are both working at looking at what funding may be out there to, like FCM funding, that type of thing, to assist and seeing this plan implemented and those targets realized. The plan was also revised to give us some specific energy reduction activities for this fiscal year, so you'll see that in the plan. And we'll be implementing that, it's assuming council agrees to the plan and the contract over this fiscal year. It identifies projects for next fiscal year 22 and over into 2025, actually, that we would evaluate. So one of the things that we identified is that we've come a long way in meeting the targets that council has set. So we've had a 26% reduction to baseline levels, but it's been primarily low-hanging fruit. So it's been I guess the easy, I wouldn't say easy projects, but the more obvious ones in terms of they're relatively known in terms of cost as well as the success. So that's stuff like lights or HVAC improvements, et cetera, those types of things we've been doing. But what's required to take us to the next level is some deeper dives, some more complex energy projects that need to be analyzed. We just don't, given the capital investment, you just don't jump out and do them. You need to assess them to determine their value and whether or not they'll work for the town. So that's what the on-site energy manager would do for the town, is take those deep dives. Without that support, we would be undertaking energy improvement projects as we were doing our own capital projects. So it would be ad hoc and perhaps less strategic than implementing this plan. So the plan identifies those projects from 22 to 25 that we would evaluate to determine whether or not there was value in proceeding with them. And then there's an appendix included with the plan, which you hadn't seen before, which gives you the projects, an estimate of the cost, the estimated energy savings, the greenhouse gas emission reduction estimates, and what the return on investment is, or the payback to do that. So you can see some have some good payback, some have a very long-term payback, but those will all be fleshed out more as we evaluate each project. The other change that the contract would have is that we identified with efficiency 1 that we have some concern about the ability to manage the projects, given all of the other projects that we're working on. So we need some project management support. And that would be to do things like prepare tenders and quotes, do the evaluation of those, and the award, and oversee, working with the contractors, manage the projects themselves. So Efficiency 1 has agreed to include that within the scope of what they'll provide in terms of services with the on-site energy manager. Before, it was just they identified the project, did the feasibility piece, and then handed it over and said, here you go. So now we'd get a little bit more support to do that. And in addition to that, we raised concern that we haven't really been able to measure performance. There were no metrics that we could look at. And so what they've done is they've set up the NRCan's portfolio manager for our facilities and buildings so that we can verify, we can track energy use within our buildings and see it all the way back to 2016. And that will enable us to verify if we saved energy with the project that we implement as well. So as I indicated, the cost to your plan is $3 million, and we'll be sourcing funding. And we've included in that $3 million the LCLC, our contribution towards that too. So there's $587,000 there. So you can subtract that from the $3 million. So our facilities are 1.6, and our water treatment and lift stations is $772,000. The cost of the on-site energy manager to the town for the full 24 months is $98,100. So the other 50% is being paid for by Efficiency 1. And then that $98,100 is split between Energize Bridgewater and engineering. So this position supports Energize Bridgewater and the work being done there, as well as the on-site energy manager for energy projects that we would do to our own facilities. As indicated, the reason why you're getting this report tonight is because you had a 6-month opt-out clause that basically said if you're not satisfied with the plan, the project identified or the contract that we could opt out. Staff are recommending that you consider continuing with the contract as it's been revised and the energy management plan as it's been revised. But I would note there is a section in the contract that does enable council to terminate with 90 days notice. So there is still, if you proceed on and next year you're not satisfied, there is a 90-day opt-out as well. So you're not completely locked in if you're not 100% satisfied. So the options for council is you can exercise your right to opt out now. You can continue with the agreement and approve the revised energy management plan, which is what's being recommended by staff, or you can continue with the agreement and request revisions to the energy management plan. Or if you feel that you need more information, if there's something missing to help you make your decision, you can certainly defer and direct staff to bring that information back to you.
Thank you. Questions from council? There's a lot in there, I know. Maybe it is straightforward. Any comments? Why don't we do it this way? Is someone prepared to put a motion on the floor? We can go from there. Councillor Caldwell, thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was having technical issues. I move that council for the town of Bridgewater continue with the on-site energy manager agreement between the town of Bridgewater and Efficiency One for the remainder of the 2-year term and approve the revised energy management plan for 2021-2025, with each year's capital commitment being determined during the respective fiscal year's budget deliberations.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor McDonald. Discussion or questions? No. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Lots of detail in there, so that was good. Thank you. Next item is 10.2. That is the request by the farmers market to lease space to the former Bridgewater Memorial Arena. And I see that this upcoming weekend is the opening weekend for the farmers market. So I wasn't even sure what that meant in the current climate of restrictions. So I know that question is going to be coming up. So I have to do some digging before the weekend. Unless something changes, I'm not even sure where it stands. But I'll turn this over to, I believe, Mark, are you leading us through this discussion on the lease? Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening again. So in April, the council passed a resolution to allow the Bridgewater Farmers Market to lease the space. And when they reviewed the lease agreement afterwards, I noticed there were some errors that hadn't been picked up by myself prior to that in terms of the payment dates. Also, when I presented the lease to the Bridgewater Farmers Market, they requested that the dates be extended to allow for the space for the Christmas market from November 21st to December 19th. So those errors were corrected and are included in the attached lease agreement. The lease will begin on May 24th, 2021, as announced. I think that was allow them to do the setup with the first farmers market. As Mayor David mentioned, here is going to be on the upcoming Saturday here from 8 o'clock until noon, 9 o'clock till noon. So and then the first date for the farmers market is as is stated there. So one of the things, I attended the AGM for the farmers market in April. They do have they did at that time have a COVID plan. One of the conditions of the lease is that they produce a COVID-19 plan as well. And so that is going to be something that is going to be a requirement at the time of signing of the lease, as well as the first payment for the use of the space at the signing of the lease as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Questions on that? I know everyone's excited to see the market back, and especially in that location. It was a huge success last year. especially in light of COVID. I'm not sure how it would have functioned in the parking lot down on King Street versus having all that space. Councillor Thorburn, you had a comment.
Yeah, when we went over this before, they were supposed to do some work on their own, some electrical outlets and stuff. Has it all been completed and ready for the upcoming season? I think there was one for the big trailer that was there and some more that they were supposed to do. Just wondering on an update on those outlets.
So the work that was required was the installation of an electrical outlet to power some of the display, some of the stands, as well as for the Airstream that's there. I was waiting to get the direction from council on this particular motion here, and then I would go verify one of the things. One is the electrical, and as well as to verify their COVID plan.
But to Councillor Thorburns' point, it's whether they do it or not, that's their responsibility.
Their responsibility and their cost.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? Hearing none, is someone prepared to make a motion, please? Councillor McDonald.
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve revisions as contained in document, am I on the right one? Yeah, document 21-043A to the facility usage agreement originally approved on April 12th, 2021, and direct staff to execute the revised agreement with Bridgewater Farmers Market Association to permit use of space within the former Bridgewater Memorial Arena for the purposes of the farmers market for the 2021 season.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And here's to a successful COVID-free season. Our next item is a returning item. This is a coordinated access service delivery contract for Energize Bridgewater. And I see Mr. Nolan is back.
Yes, I'm back on a slightly different topic this time. So I'm happy to come back to council with an update from staff on the May 10 council report regarding a coordinated access service delivery contract. So on May 10, I presented a report to council with the recommendation that council direct staff to enter direct contract negotiations with a nonprofit organization, South Shore Coordinated Access Association, to deliver coordinated access services in accordance with funding requirements of the Energize Bridgewater program and the federal government's homelessness strategy called Reaching Home. So council deferred the decision to a future meeting and requested the following information. More details on the scope of the contract for coordinated access service delivery, some of the performance requirements within the contract to ensure that Energize Bridgewater outcomes will be achieved, more details on the structure and capacity of the organization that will deliver the required services, as well as more clarity on the market for potential bidders to deliver coordinated access services. So under the direction of the CAO, staff considered council's concerns and is adjusting the procurement process, or we're determined that a procurement process by way of a request for expressions of interest will satisfy some of the questions the council had. So request for expressions of interest is a two-stage procurement process that can be used to gather information to inform a second stage of procurement. The RFI process will include information on the scope of the service for coordinated access, stipulations of a potential contract, and the general requirements of the organization that will be delivering the coordinated access services. And it will collect information on the capabilities of potential bidders through the process. So this process should provide the town with confidence in prospective service delivery agents for coordinated access and will give a basis for the development of the next stage of procurement. So following the RFI process, the town has the following options for procuring services. The town may proceed to a full request for proposals in the situation where multiple qualified bidders are identified. And a second alternative could be that staff could proceed with the alternative procurement provisions of the purchasing and tendering policy, which I spoke to at the last council session, in a situation where multiple qualified bidders are not identified. And in both of those situations, we would come back to council as staff to kind of walk through the procurement process and any contract associated with coordinated access, and then that would be a council decision. And yeah, so the ultimate objective of this process is to identify the most qualified third party capable of delivering the services and enter into a service delivery contract with them to meet some of our Energized Bridgewater outcomes. So that's all I've got in terms of a presentation. Yeah, I'll open the floor for questions.
Deputy Mayor Tanner.
I assume the RFI will be posted on the provincial procurement site and all that kind of, general process. Okay, thanks.
I'm much more comfortable with this than that where we were a couple weeks ago. So I appreciate staff coming back and working to get us on this path. Other questions or comments? No, I think everyone's happy with where we're going now. Great. Okay. Thank you, Nelson. Our next item is the extension of lease for engine number 4 to the Municipality District Cumberland. I know the CAO is gonna tell us all about it, including exactly where it is.
It's still in Cumberland County. So I had a conversation with the fire service coordinator with the Municipality Cumberland, and essentially he was not able to make a commitment one way or the other, but indicated that they would have those conversations with their council about their intention with respects to the pumper truck, and specifically whether or not they'd be interested in seeing an extension to the lease. They have gone out to tender for some equipment, but they're concerned about taking a year to a year and a half, if not longer, to get. So they definitely have a need. It's just a matter of how they want to address that need. So I did indicate that if they're looking at an extension to the lease, we have some concerns, obviously, about the value of the pumper truck in terms of losing value over a year or two of them using it, and that we'd want some type of monetary consideration for that. So they're aware of that, and at the same time, they're also aware that we would deem it surplus if the lease were not extended. So they may be considering making an offer for purchase as well. So I gave them until the end of July, figuring that would give them enough time to get their council together, have that conversation, and decide what direction they wanted to go. And their CAO and the fire service coordinator were agreeable to that. So that's where it's at.
Thank you. Questions from council? We're kind of waiting to hear back. So hopefully this, we want them to have a successful outcome and hopefully get a new truck. So, all right, you'll keep us posted. Perfect, thank you. Down to new business, proposed summer meeting schedule. So for our 2 new councillors, this is every year we reduce our council meetings in the summer by half. But there always the ability at the call of the chair. So if something does happen, so I wouldn't make. Well, you can make summer plans, obviously, but just be aware that it hasn't happened in the last 5 years, but just be aware that if need be, we might need a meeting. But you can see the meeting schedule as proposed there. Discussion session July 5th, council meeting July 12th, and then discussion session on Tuesday, August 3rd, because Monday's the holiday, and a council meeting August 9th. So that, and then returning to regular council meetings in September. So June and September are as normal, but our summers we do reduce that schedule. Are there any questions to that? Hearing none, is someone prepared to make a motion, please? Councillor Caldwell.
I move that council approve the proposed council meeting schedule for the summer months, July and August 2021, and hold discussion sessions on July 5 and August 3rd, and council meetings on July 12th and August 9th.
Thank you. Seconded by? Councillor Conklin was first. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. The next item is FCM Board of Directors. So I was appointed to the Board of Directors for last year, and if it seems like we just did this, it's because we did. It was September, so it wasn't a full year, but when the pandemic hit, FCM shifted all its annual meetings essentially to September, October. And so it hasn't been a full year since I was appointed to the Board of Directors. And so I'd like to continue on, and that does require the blessing of council. And so that is there, and I would appreciate a motion unless somebody has objections, which is also fine. Councillor McDonald.
I'll make a motion. I would move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater authorize David Mitchell to stand for election as a representative on FCM's Board of Directors, and if elected, authorize expenses related to attending meetings of FCM's Board of Directors.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Thank you. Obviously, the general meeting this year is virtual. So, and the board meetings thus far have been virtual. I don't think I realized at the time how many board meetings there would be, but they're at least free for now because they're all virtual. So thank you. We have a mover, a seconder. Any questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We're down to our additions. So addition is document 20-071, which is a letter to Premier Ian Rankin. And I'm just, it doesn't require a motion, but rather council's blessing. This was sent out earlier today. I trust that you've had a chance to read it. The last couple weeks in particular have been very hard on local businesses, and specifically what I'm hearing is from our smaller merchants that sell the same products that are sold in other stores that don't have to close. And so they're struggling to pay their rents. They've laid off their staff, and they're not sure when there is an end date to this, because as we know, a couple of weeks ago, June 1st was the target. Last week, June 9th was the target. Today, we were hoping for some additional information, but the information that came was that in the coming days, there will be more information. And so myself, along with quite a few mayors, especially town mayors around the province, as we represent the urban centers in Nova Scotia, have been all sending letters to the Premier, respectfully asking that they provide a clear, detailed plan. As I put in my letter, we need a target to aim for, so that people know what we need to achieve in order to have that opening. I certainly feel that if we know what we have to do, it's easier to get there than if we don't have that knowledge. And then the other is that the current Health Protection Act that I mentioned, that for example says a small retail clothing store or shoe store needs to close, but you can go to a large big box store, for example, where they do sell essential items, but you can also buy those clothes and those shoes that small retail operation can't sell unless it's just curbside. So it's asking that same protocols be followed by everybody, of course, not looking for favoritism, but looking to level the playing field so our small businesses have a chance. As Mayor Sandra Snow pointed out, and I believe it's in the letter as well, Nova Scotia had the best recovery of any province. If you look at February 2020 to February 2021, we recovered the closest to pre-COVID, pre-pandemic numbers, better than any other province. And that was because our economy is driven by small business. And so we need to make sure we have small business at the end of this. So I'm looking for hopefully council's support to send that letter to Premier Rankin, and along with my fellow mayors. Deputy Mayor Tanner.
Just one quick thought. Should we copy Minister McGuire in this, just so that he's aware that because our municipal unit is communicating with the premier in this vein. I don't know if it's worthwhile or not, but just a thought.
No, I actually think that's a great idea to include the minister. We'll make that adjustment.
See, I have one good idea this meeting.
We'll write it down. Councillor Caldwell.
Yes, I do agree with the sentiment of the letter. I'm somewhat reluctant to support sort of potentially politicizing an issue that's of public health, and I really think that the province has done an excellent job so far handling the pandemic. But I do agree with the sentiment of the letter. I will note that perhaps we need to be careful what we wish for, because part of the letter says the province could potentially close all non-essential retail to make it consistent. I'm not sure that's what we're looking for, but I just add that as a comment. I do agree with the overall sentiment of the letter. It's well done.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor Caldwell. Yeah, it's been we've done well, I think, because we haven't politicized the decision-making process from the province, and yeah, I'm certainly hoping that the medical decisions are continuing to be made by the medical team for sure. No, thank you for those comments. Other comments? Any objection to the letter going? We'll make the addition of Minister Maguire to that, and I can amend the letter to your point, Councillor Caldwell, and just ask that the playing field be leveled then, instead of the two options. I was attempting to more drive home the point, like you can't have it both ways, right? It's either all or nothing. So, and I don't want it to be nothing. So we can tweak that if you wish. So I'm not hearing any objections to that. We'll make some changes and we'll send that to the premier, as well as in my post today, offering any assistance we can provide to the province to help with the reopening plan. Our next item is the two applications to purchase land. So we'll start with application to purchase land, lot 53, Glen Allen Drive. I don't know, is CIO walking us through this one?
Yep. So council's received an offer to acquire lot 53 on Glen Allen Drive. There's a map that council saw that shows where that's at. The offer is $25,000. We've recently had an appraisal done, and from that appraisal, we can confirm that the offer meets the market value test, so it exceeds the appraised value. The recommendation is that council accept the offer to purchase lot 53 for $25,000 and authorize the execution of a purchase and sale agreement and buyback agreement. And the buyback agreement would require that the construction be completed within the 24 months, and that it be conditional on a acceptable provision to maintain the drainage infrastructure, which is at the rear of the lot and was put in by the town to alleviate some flooding concerns in the area.
Okay. Questions on that? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Caldwell.
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater accept the $25,000 offer and authorize execution of the purchase and sale agreement and buyback agreement for lot 53, Glen Allen Drive, conditional on an acceptable provisions to maintain the drainage infrastructure.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Application to purchase land 5 acres off Acorn Drive. I love how we've phrased that as the topic. 5 acres off Acorn Drive.
Yeah. So we received an offer to purchase that land, the 5 acres. The amount that was offered is $63,500, and that is based on $12,500 per acre. And that's consistent with an appraisal that the town just recently had completed for that same area of land. So it does meet the requirement, the market value test, which is what council is required to sell land for. The recommendation is that council accept that offer and that offer be conditional upon meeting the requirements of the subdivision bylaw. So the subdivision bylaw will require that there, in order to subdivide that 5 acres further into parcels for development, that infrastructure would have to be put in place that met the subdivision bylaw requirements. So that'd be roads, sewer, water. And that also addresses the issue about the length of dead-end streets as well. So the subdivision bylaw would have to be satisfied with respect to that.
Perfect. Thank you. Question from Deputy Mayor Tanner.
So do we associate any timelines like we did with the previous land purchase with buyback options if the land's not developed? I mean, we're not with this, but.
Yeah. There isn't one recommended with this, simply given the nature of the development. There would be time involved in designing the infrastructure, having it approved through the subdivision process. It could certainly take more than 2 years to do that. You could, if council wants to, you could look at putting a buyback in place, but the suggestion would be that it would probably be more than 2 years to see that 5 acres. If you wanted to provide enough time to do that, yeah.
I know we just did something similar with Old Town Hills or what have you, but.
There was, with the development agreement, there was, I think, a 5 to 10 year phasing. So you could do, it has to start within 12 months and finish within say 3 years or 4 years. Or so you could do something like that if that's something you want to have considered. Staff could negotiate that buyback and bring it back.
Okay. And just maybe a quick comment, and I said it in camera, so I'll say it in public. This developer is a great partner with the town of Bridgewater. They've done great things in that particular area. However, I still feel like we're selling this land too inexpensively, and I realize they have to put in the infrastructure and all that sort of thing. But the reality is there'll probably be at least 20 lots defined for this particular area of land. It's strategic for them. And I think we could get, the town of Bridgewater can get more value, more revenue from this particular sale, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you for that. Further questions or comments? Someone prepared to make a motion?
Can I? Yeah, just before the motion's made, I guess if there is a desire to see a buyback negotiated, that should be included in the motion, that we either with the parameters outlined that it has to commence within a certain period of time and be completed, or that we negotiate a buyback and bring it back. That you'll accept the price subject to a buyback agreement being brought back for council's approval.
What is the will of council on that, Deputy Mayor Tanner?
So what would the suggested timeline be? 5 or 10 years? Or it's a small parcel of land, so is 5 enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say that we could use that as a starting point, and if the developer is agreeable to that 5, then we wouldn't need to bring that back. But if the developer wanted something longer, then we could bring that back.
So is your concern more the finishing or the starting, Deputy Mayor? I know with the other project, it wasn't just you have to start, but we wanted to make sure they finished it. But we're a decade into that one.
I think it's both. I mean, we don't want to see land in the town of Bridgewater tied up at again, in my opinion, a relatively inexpensive price for an unlimited period of time when we could be gleaning tax revenue from it. So I just want to make sure that we're moving forward and the project's moving forward. So
No, fair point. Councillor Thorburn.
Yeah, I actually agree with the deputy mayor. We should have some time frame on there, but it would be pretty hard not knowing the variables so it would take to road construction and whatnot. I think the 5-year time, 5 to 10 years is good. With the old hills, we've waited 10 years before we've done anything. The only difference.
Yeah, so I'm seeing some heads nod in terms of the buyback agreement. Just thoughts on 5 years? Is that what we're looking at? Again, I'm seeing some heads nodding. Councillor McDonald.
Start make sure.
Oh, sorry, I lost you a little bit there. Can you just repeat that, Councillor McDonald?
Sorry. Yeah, when we were talking that the project started within 5 years or completed within 5 years.
Oh, I believe it completed was what we were looking at.
So may I ask another question to follow up?
Yep.
So if they started the project but had not completed it, we could buy it back at the price that we sold it for, even though there's been some work done to it. I'm not quite sure if I fully understand the buyback.
Yeah, usually it would be less improvement. So the buyback agreement would set that out. So if they invested in infrastructure, that type of thing, we'd have to factor that in. But we'd have the opportunity to buy back what hadn't been developed. I would suggest that we could have that, as I say, we could raise that with the purchaser to say a 5-year buyback, meaning that we'd like to see the development fully subdivided. I don't know if we would want to say every single house had to be built, but the lots would be created, and see if that is acceptable to them. And if they want to have a longer time period, then we can indicate that the price is acceptable, but we need to take back the time period to council for council's agreement.
I like that idea, just because if it does become 20 units, for example, I'm not sure 5 years is enough to build the whole thing out.
Yeah.
But it should be to subdivide it and be substantially completed, I would think, within 5 years. But it's also hard to say. We don't know in 4 years. We don't know what the economy is going to face, right?
Yeah.
What we're going to face here, if this is housing prices are not going to, if there's going to be an artificial kind of halting of the housing market by a level of government, and we don't know what the impact in that's going to be on development, or if this is going to keep going. I mean, who wouldn't want to live here, right? So it could keep going. So do we want to just advise staff that council is okay with the price, but we'd like to work in a buyback provision and take it from there? Does that make sense, Tammy?
Yeah, so I think we're looking at that we accept the offer and authorize the execution of purchase and sale agreement conditional upon meeting the requirements of the subdivision bylaw and subject to negotiating the buyback agreement for subsequent approval by council. So they know they're good on the price, and as long as we can come to, if it's a 5-year time frame, we'll authorize that. So if we put the 5-year in there, and if they want something different, then we will come back to council and have that approved.
Okay, perfect. So if you refresh your eScribe, you'll see an updated motion to reflect the buyback agreement for subsequent approval. And are there any further comments or questions? And not hearing any, someone prepared to make a motion with that new provision included?
I can make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald.
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater accept the $63,500 offer based on $12,500 per acre and authorize execution of the purchase and sale agreement for PID 606-44997, 5 acres off Acorn Drive, conditional upon meeting the requirements of the subdivision bylaw and subject to negotiating a buyback agreement for subsequent approval by council.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Caldwell was first. Further discussion? Had quite a bit. Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. That concludes the regularly scheduled meeting. We have an in-camera item following this under section 22(2)A, acquisition, sale, lease, and security of municipal property. So I'll ask council to hang tight and a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Councillor Thurman, seconded by Deputy Mayor Tanner. We are adjourned. Thank you.